morning, good Vach, Shavua Tov, and good Chodesh. It's Rosh Chodesh Elul. We're entering the Hebrew month of Elul. An incredible, wonderful, amazing time when the king is in the field, so to speak. It's an old saying, God is in the field. He is drawing near to us to make it easier for us to draw near to him. Why did God make the world? Why did God make the people? Why did God make us? Because he wanted to. Because he wanted to. Such a seemingly simple answer. I heard a beautiful talk tonight by Rav Mendel Kalmanson, who's been on our show a couple of times. He wrote the book On Purpose and another book, Positivity Bias. He's incredible. He's the Chabad rabbi in Belgravia, London. And he gave such a beautiful talk. Just talking about, it was the desire of God. You know, you can talk about your needs and your desires. You can explain your needs. Your desires are your desires. And God desired us. And his laws for us, those are what he desires us to do. It's an emotional connection. It's an incredible connection that God has with us, makes with us. God, so to speak, makes God's self vulnerable by revealing to us what God wants from us and the fact that God wanted us to be. And so as we head into this month that prepares us for Rosh Hashanah, when we crown God, King of the world, with our praise and prayers and love, it's just a beautiful time to reflect on the fact that the only reason we exist is because God wanted us. God wanted us. And it's so, both humbling and loving and empowering all at the same time. It's a really beautiful period that we're entering into. So let's do it together by lighting up the darkness. Who's in the house? Melissa in Great Neck, Sharon in New Jersey, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Mo in Brooklyn, Bella in Florida, Nancy in North Carolina, Shandora in the Bronx, Chaim in Florida, Aoife in Florida, Marie in Freeport. Short Daf, again, you're all my heroes on the East Coast tuning in at 12:49 a.m. in the morning. Incredible. Let's be efficient. Page 70. We're on 70a, right at the top here in chapter 5 of Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud. Continuing our discussion of Mishna number 3 here in chapter 5. And the Gemara relates, there was an incident involving a certain house where the wine of Jews was stored. And a Gentile entered the house, and he locked the door before the Jew. But there was a crack in the door, and the Gentile was found standing between the barrels. The question here that we keep asking over and over in different ways, once the sages decreed that the wine of Gentiles, because of concerns of idolatry, was prohibited to the Jews for consumption and for benefit, so then we have to draw boundaries around that decree. And so when there's a doubt whether the wine came into the possession of Gentiles or not, they have to rule on the particulars, the circumstances, to understand, is there cause to be concerned? Did it come into the possession of the Gentile? Was there an opportunity for them to pour it out as a libation? If there was such an opportunity, that's going to be considered enough of possession, so to speak. And then the idea that, but if it comes into their possession, but they're being supervised by the Jew who would stop them from touching it and using it as a libation or just coming into contact with it, which would render it prohibited for us, because the wine is supervised, it's going to remain permitted. But if the Gentile, which is to say the idolater, had sort of freedom of opportunity and to touch it, to drink it, to pour it as a libation. He had an unsupervised opportunity. Even if he didn't actually do it, we don't know, but that's going to render it prohibited. Right, so a Gentile entered the house and he unlocked the door before the Jew, but there was a crack in the door and the Gentile was found standing between the barrels. So Rava said all the barrels that were opposite the crack through which the Gentile could be seen are permitted, because he would have been wary about being seen tampering with them. But the barrels on this side and that side of the crack where the Gentile could not be seen are forbidden, as perhaps the Gentile used the barrels for a libation to his deity. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Jew's wine that was stored in the lower story of a house in which the Jew was living in the upper story, and a Gentile in the lower story, and the wine could be supervised from the upper story. One day the residents heard a sound of quarreling, and they went outside, and the Gentile came back in first, and he locked the door before the Jew came in. So Rava said the wine is permitted, because the Gentile presumably said to himself, well, just as I came back in early, perhaps my neighbor, the Jew, came back in early also. He's sitting in the upper story, and he could be watching me, and therefore he would not use the wine for a libation. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain inn, Ushpiza, where a Jew's wine was stored, and a Gentile was found sitting among the barrels. So Rava said if he was caught as a thief, i.e. if the Gentile seemed startled, and he did not have a good explanation for being there, well then the wine is permitted, as the Gentile was presumably afraid of being caught, and he wasn't going to sit around pouring libations. But if not, if he felt comfortable, that he was okay to be there, he wasn't acting like he was sneaking around. If he felt entitled to be there, then the wine is forbidden, because he might have poured some of that wine out as a libation. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain house where wine was stored, and a Gentile was found standing among the barrels. So Rava said if he has a way to excuse his entrance to where the wine was stored, the wine is forbidden. Same reason. If he's comfortable being there, he doesn't feel like he has to sneak around and get in and out quickly, then he might have poured the wine as a libation, which makes it forbidden for Jews. But if not, the wine is permitted. And the Gemara raises an objection to this ruling from a Baraisa. If an inn was locked and a Gentile was inside, or if the Jew said to the Gentile, safeguard my wine, the wine is forbidden, because he's going to have the run of the place and he could be pouring the wine as a libation. So what? Is it not forbidden even if the Gentile does not have a way to excuse his entrance simply because it was locked and he was inside? And the Gemara answers no. The Baraisa is referring to a situation where he does have a way to excuse his entrance, otherwise the wine is permitted. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Jew and a certain Gentile who were sitting and drinking wine, and the Jew heard the sound of praying at the synagogue. He got up and went to pray. Rava said the wine is permitted because the Gentile presumably said to himself, any moment now he will remember his wine and come back for it. So he doesn't feel like he has the run of the place. He doesn't feel like he has free access to the wine because the Jew could come back and take it. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Jew and a certain Gentile who were sitting on a ship. And the Jew heard the sound of the shofar of twilight indicating the beginning of Shabbos. And he disembarked. So we're talking about a ship that's docked, right? And he went into town to spend Shabbos there. Rava said the wine is permitted because the Gentile presumably said to himself, any moment now he will remember his wine and come back. The Gentile has no reason to know what the Jew is doing and that he's leaving for 25 hours. And the Gemara comments, and if one might object that the Gentile is presumably not concerned because he knows that the Jew will not return until the end of Shabbos. Didn't Rava say, Isur, the convert, told me when we were still Gentiles before converting, we used to say, Jews do not actually observe Shabbos. As if they observe Shabbos, how many wallets would be found in the marketplace that the Jews could not take on Shabbos? And what he's talking about is Jews who find themselves outside before Shabbos begins, or rather find themselves somewhere, not in their homes, at the time that Shabbos begins, and then therefore they can no longer carry. And since they can no longer carry, they would have to just put their wallet down where they are and go home. And then, non-Jews would find these wallets lying in the street and pick them up. That's kind of an odd thing to say because I think, when it comes to guarding our money, not just Jews, but all reasonable people would be like, well, if I have a reason that I can't be carrying my money during this 25-hour period, I better get home before that 25-hour period. But I guess they were saying, but it should have happened at some point, and evidently they don't let that happen to themselves, so they must not be strict about these laws of Shabbos when it comes to losing their money. and said Isur, and I did not know at that time, right? This is a convert who says that when he was a Gentile, I did not know that we maintain that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. As Rabbi Yitzchak says, one who finds a wallet on Shabbos may carry it in increments of less than 4 cubits. Right? You violate the law of carrying on Shabbos when you carry something in the public domain a distance of 4 cubits, about 6 feet. Or when you transfer it from a private domain to a public domain, or from a public domain to a private domain. But very interesting, we shouldn't have anything to do with money. Money is muktzah. On Shabbos, we don't even touch it. But if you've got a situation where you're going to experience financial loss, you can make use of, basically a clear understanding of what the law really is. And we have this ruling of Rabbi Yitzchak that you can move it, let's say 5.5 feet and put it down. Pick it up, move it 5.5 feet and put it down. It'll take you a long time to get home, but at least you don't have to abandon your money in a public thoroughfare. And one who finds a wallet on Shabbos may carry it in increments of less than 4 cubits. So evidently, Gentiles assume that a Jew would violate Shabbos for monetary gain. Just they don't know what our laws are. They make assumptions about us. I mean, this applies in a lot of other areas of the law as well. I am reminded of that joke, right? I haven't told this one in ages, so I'm probably going to butcher it. Nina would say, "Don't tell the joke, Sal, if you're not sure what it is." But I'm pretty sure it's like this. It's something like, right? I think it's like a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew are chatting about their religious leaders, right? And the Muslim says, my Imam is such a holy man that he was once, he was once caught in the desert. And he was dying of thirst, and he prayed and prayed and prayed, and everywhere else, was hot and dry. But right in front of him, a spring of water appeared, and then the Christian says, "Yeah, my priest is such a holy man that once he was caught in a snowstorm, and he was going to die, and he prayed and prayed and prayed, and everywhere else was a snowstorm, but right around him it became, warm and sheltered, and he was fine." And the Jew says, well, our rabbi is such a holy man that he was once out on Shabbos and he found a bag of money. And he prayed and prayed and prayed. And then all of a sudden, everywhere else, it was Shabbos. But right where he was, it was Tuesday. Okay, maybe I didn't butcher it. Too bad. Where am I now? Okay, the Gemara relates, there was an incident involving a certain Jew and a certain Gentile. Oh, no, I just read that. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did read that. Yeah, okay. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain lion who roared in a wine press, and a Gentile heard the roar and was frightened, and he hid among the barrels of wine. And Rava said the wine is permitted because the Gentile presumably said to himself, just as I am hiding, a Jew might also be hiding behind me and see me. Again, this question of, does he feel like he's supervised or not, so that he would keep his hands off the barrel and commit idolatry by pouring a libation. There was another incident involving certain thieves who came to Pumbedisa, and they opened many barrels of wine. And Rava said, the wine is permitted. And what is the reason? Because most of the thieves in Pumbedisa are Jews. It's a Jewish town, so the Jews in that, so that, God, we hope that there were very few thieves in that town, but the thieves that were there were Jews, so if they opened the wine, they weren't idolaters who would render it prohibited by touching it. And there was a similar incident in Nehardea, and Shmuel said the wine is permitted. And the Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is this? Perhaps it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says, with regard to cases of uncertainty concerning ritual purity, that if the uncertainty is with regard to a person's entry into a certain place, he is deemed pure, right? So there are two questions here. Did a certain person enter a vicinity, an area, And then once he was in there, did he do a certain action? So there's two uncertainties. And this is, as we learned in a Mishna, Tractate Taharo 6.5, with regard to one who enters into a valley during the rainy season, i.e. winter, when people generally do not enter this area. And there was tuma, ritual impurity, in such and such a field, meaning that a human body had been buried there, but we're not sure where exactly in that field. We know it's in that field, but we don't know where in that field. An unmarked grave in that field. So if you walk over it, you become tameh, and then when the temple is standing, you can't enter the temple until you go through the 7-day purification involving the sprinkling of the waters of the ashes of the red heifer on the 3rd and 7th day, etc. So that's why you need to know where graves are so you avoid walking over them. Here, there's a field where we don't know where the grave is. So the question is, did you enter the field? Because if you entered that field, there's a possibility that you walked over the grave, and therefore we would have to say that you are tameh as a matter of doubt. But when you have a compound uncertainty, a compound doubt, both that did you enter that field or not, on top of if you did enter it, we're not sure if you walked over the grave, then it's attenuated enough that we don't say you're tameh. Okay? Who enters a field during the rainy season, where people generally do not enter this area, and there was ritual impurity in such and such a field. And he said, I know I walked to that place, right? I walked in the valley that contains a field, but I do not know whether I entered that field where the tuma was, or whether I did not enter. So Rabbi Eliezer says, in a case of uncertainty with regard to entry, i.e. it is uncertain whether he entered the area where the tuma is located, he is ritually pure. Again, because there's two levels of doubt. But if he certainly entered the area where the tuma is located, I mean, he knows he walked into that field, and the uncertainty pertains to whether he walked over the grave, because we don't know where the grave is in that field, then he is tameh, because there's only one level of doubt. So apparently the ruling of Shmuel that in a case where it is uncertain whether the Gentile thieves enter the house at all, the wine is permitted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. But the Gemara rejects this analysis. No. It is different there with regard to the wine barrels. Since there are thieves who open barrels for the sake of perhaps finding money in them and are not interested in the wine, it is a case of an extra level of uncertainty, as it is uncertain whether the thieves were Gentiles or Jews, and even if they were Gentiles, it is uncertain whether or not they touched the wine. In a case of compound uncertainty, everyone agrees that the wine is not forbidden. Now on page 70b. There was an incident involving a certain Gentile girl who was found among the wine barrels, and she was holding wine froth in her hand. And Rava said the wine is permitted, as it is reasonable to say that she took it from the outside of the barrel and not from the inside of the barrel. It is reasonable to say that she happened upon the froth while it was still there, even though the froth is no longer there now. There was another incident involving a certain army that entered Nehardea and opened many barrels of wine. And when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said there was a similar incident that was brought before Rabbi Elazar, and he deemed the wine permitted. But I do not know what the reason he used. I do not know whether he permitted it because he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says concerning uncertainty with regard to whether a person entered or not, the person or item is tahor, ritually pure, or whether he permitted it because he maintains that most of those who went with that particular army were Jews, i.e. although that was a Gentile army, its ancillaries were mostly Jews in that region. And the Gemara asks, if that is so, if he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, why would he permit the wine? Is this a case of uncertainty with regard to entry? It is clear that the ancillaries came and opened the barrels. So it is a case of uncertainty only with regard to contact, whether or not they touched the wine. And Rabbi Eliezer agrees that in such a case we should act stringently and deem the wine prohibited. And the Gemara answers, since they opened many barrels, it is reasonable to say that they opened the barrels only with the intention of finding money and had no interest in the wine itself. Otherwise, why did they keep opening barrels? And therefore, it is similar to a case of uncertainty with regard to entry. There was another incident involving a certain female owner of a wine shop who transferred the key to the door of her wine shop to a Gentile woman. And Rabbi Yitzchak said that Rabbi Lazar said there was a similar incident that was brought before the sages in the study hall, and they said she transferred to her the responsibility for safeguarding the key alone, but did not authorize her to enter the tavern. So there is no concern that she entered there. Right? Had the Gentile been alone with the run of the place in the wine shop, we would have had to deem the wine prohibited because she might well have poured some wine as a libation. The fact that she had possession of the key for a certain amount of time doesn't mean she entered the store. She was entrusted to guard the key. Abaye said we learned this law in a Mishna as well. Tractate Taharos 7:1. In the case of one who transferred keys to one who is unreliable with regard to Tuma, now we're talking about a Jew who is ignorant of the laws of Tuma. This is an Am Haaretz, an ignorant person. Even though contact with an Am Haaretz renders pure items impure, his pure items are pure because he transferred to the Am Haaretz the responsibility for safeguarding the key alone and did not authorize him to enter. Now that the Mishnah has determined that his pure items are pure, is it necessary to state that this principle with regard to the laws of wine used for a libation would have the same answer? Is that necessary? Sounds to me like, well, yeah, because the laws of Avoda Zara and whether wine has become prohibited because of Avoda Zara are often more stringent than the laws of Tuma and Tahara. The Gemara asks with regard to Abaye's reasoning, is this to say that the laws of tahor items, ritually pure items, are more stringent than those concerning wine used for libation? And the Gemara answers, well, actually, yes. Indeed, that is so, as it was stated that there was a dispute with regard to a courtyard whose owners divided it among themselves with a low partition, right, a wall you could reach over. And Rav says if one's neighbor on the other side of the partition is an Am Haaretz, right, a Jew who's ignorant of halacha, of law, one's pure items that he leaves in the courtyard are rendered impure. But in the case of a Gentile neighbor, this does not render his wine an idolatrous libation. So it sounds like the laws of Tumah and Tahar are more stringent than the laws of Avodah Zarah in this situation. And Rabbi Yochanan says his pure items remain pure as well. Evidently, Rav considers the laws of purity more stringent than those of wine used for libation. Now, the Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rav from a Baraisa. In this similar situation, if the inner courtyard belongs to a chaver, this is a Jew who is not only cognizant of the law, but devoted to the meticulous adherence to keeping, he wants his food to be tahor, in a state of ritual purity, and himself in a state of ritual purity when he's eating it. He doesn't need to do that. That's treating himself like a priest with respect to teruma, consecrated food that only priests can eat. It has to be eaten in a state of ritual purity. But the chaverim, right, these Jews who were not priests but held themselves to this higher standard, were meticulous. They didn't need to do that, but they did it. Right, so if the inner courtyard belongs to a chaver and the outer courtyard belongs to an Am Haaretz, the chaver may lay out his produce there in the inner courtyard and place his vessels there without concern that the Am Haaretz will touch them and render them impure. And this applies even if the hand of the Am Haaretz can reach in there. And this poses a difficulty to the opinion of Rav, who holds that even in a situation where there is a partition, there is a concern about contact with the Am Haaretz. And the Gemara answers that Rav would have said to you, it is different there. As with the Am Haaretz, as were the Am Haaretz to tamper with the produce, he could be caught and accused not of tampering for the sake of imparting tuma, but as a thief. Therefore, he's not going to just reach over into the courtyard of the chaver. Therefore, there is no concern that he will tamper with it, not because he would restrain himself from rendering the objects impure, but because he doesn't want to be accused of being a thief. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara suggests, come in here, support for Rav's opinion from a Baraisa. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the roof of a chaver is above the roof of his neighbor who is an Am Haaretz, the chaver may lay out produce there and place vessels there, provided that the hand of the Am Haaretz cannot reach there. But if it is within his reach, then the pure items of the chaver are rendered impure. And this poses a difficulty to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who deems permitted pure items in a courtyard that is divided by a low partition. And the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan could have said to you, no, that's different. As were the Am Haaretz to be discovered reaching up to the upper roof, he has a way to excuse his behavior by saying, I merely stretched myself. I was not intending to tamper with anything. Presumably, he couldn't make that excuse for reaching over the low wall to his neighboring courtyard the way he could when he's reaching up in view of the roof. Come and hear that which is taught in the same Baraisa. If the roof of a chaver is beside the roof of an Am Haaretz, that chaver may lay out produce there and place vessels there, even if the hand of the Am Haaretz can reach there. Well, this poses a difficulty to the statement of Rav, and the Gemara answers that Rav could have said to you, isn't there the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, which stands in accordance with my opinion with regard to roofs that are next to one another? What I say is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. And that's where we conclude our discussion of Mishnah number 3. We'll pick it up, God willing, tomorrow, the regular Sunday time, 6 p.m. Pacific, with Mishnah number 4. Take a few comments. Nina is not able to pass me the questions, so I am scanning the comments directly. And I see Sharon says, nice article in Chabad.org. I made sure our local Chabad rabbi saw it. Thank you so much, Sharon. Yeah, Nina shared that in the comments yesterday. If you're curious about it, you could just Google Chabad.org, Salvador Litvak, or Chabad.org, Guns N' Moses. They published a beautiful article about Nina and me and the movie. And, once everything settles down, with this incredible hard work we're doing now, the movie is being re-released in over 500 theaters on September 7th, 5 nights only. It's probably playing in a theater near you. If you haven't seen Guns N' Moses yet, please get your tickets now. Tickets are already selling and selling fast. 5 nights only, September 7th through 11th. But when all this kind of, simmers down, eventually, later in the fall, we'll be streaming. And I anticipate, just because I've already been contacted by some people, that we'll be starting to do, scholar in residence weekends or nights, show the movie, give a talk, perhaps share the accidental Talmudic story of various synagogues around the country, especially Chabad. So really look forward to interacting with people, directly in person when that comes out. If you think that would be interesting for you, for your rabbi, please reach out. Right now, it's, like I said, crazy busy, but we're going to have a lot more of that happening later in the year and next year. And, who knows, maybe lots of events to come for a long, long time of that sort. You can always find us through gunsandmosesmovie.com or, of course, accidentaltalmudist.org. The rest are greetings and greetings. Very good. So Shavua Tov, good Vach, and good Chodesh. It is Rosh Chodesh Elul. We're entering Elul, the final month of the year, and we're all making that personal accounting in our lives. And we can start with what went right in the previous year, and then what we need to work on as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah in 1 month. All the best, my holy sisters and brothers, and God willing, see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific.